this is what we run into a lot when we actually talk about scriptures that two people disagree on, right? Whereas only the best I can do is I can bring to you, as I've tried to do tonight, and put on screen and talk about them as you can see them and I can see them in real time. The best I can do is talk about the scriptures. And so I've provided scriptures. I try to break them down with according to their words, with graphics and everything, just try to make it as clear as possible, according to actual counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you would actually address those, just like I addressed your scriptures you provided, then that would be a good start to, if you truly feel that I'm wrong on this and that you want to sway my understanding of this, well, naturally you want to address what I put forward first. Otherwise, you're just ignoring all the points I brought up and just saying, oh, hey, but what about these verses over here? No, we can't just ignore all the stuff I put up first and we'll talk about these other things. I want to address the other things too. That's why I'm going through all these questions here for people in the chat. But please address the stuff that I brought up. If you see some, break in logic or some huge misstep in the actual presentation that I did with the actual scriptures as well, then that would be a starting place. All right, so here's our first verse we want to take a quick look at. Exodus 12:6 says, "You shall keep it, the Passover lamb that is, up till the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening." So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at Passover and how it actually defines the term evening. And that's super important for us to grasp. Exodus 12:18, "In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening." The reason I'm introducing this is because we're going to actually break down the Feast of Unleavened Bread, all 7 days of it, including Passover, which is technically the day before it starts. We're going to break that down here in a few minutes so that we can understand this verbiage in this language where it's mentioning 7 days. That's something important, because if you actually do the math, the 14th day until the 21st day is not 7 days. It's 8 days. All right, so we'll look at that here in just a few minutes. At Leviticus 23:5-6, where it mentions Passover instructions, "In the 14th day of the first month at evening is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread." All right, so we'll go here. It says Numbers 28. That's another reiteration of Passover instructions. 16-17, it says, "On the 14th day of the first month in the Passover is the Passover of the Lord. And on the 15th day of this month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It shall be eaten for 7 days.
In my opinion, this verse answers any confusion that there might be from the previous verse.
So we get 3 different instructions here in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. But like, was it Bobby Mays? You guys remember Bobby Mays, the guy that was like the home sales guy, with the big beard? But wait, there's more. Jubilees, guys. Jubilees also tells us instruction on Passover as well. Jubilees 49, 1-2, it starts off talking. It says, "Remember the commandment which the Lord commanded you concerning the Passover, that you should celebrate it in its season on the 14th of the first month, that you should kill it before it is evening, and that they should eat it by night on the evening of the 15th from the time of the setting of the sun." So now we're starting to get some actual indication of what it means to go from them having this Passover lamb from the 10th to the 14th and then slaying it on the 14th and then eating it by night in the evening time of the 15th, right? Because the evening time is the transitionary moment between 2 calendar days. So it says, "For on this night, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of joy." What festival? Is the Passover day the 7-day festival? No, the Passover day is the 14th. The 7th-day festival is from the 15th through the 21st. So it says, "For on this night." What night is it? The night they start actually eating the Passover lamb. And that's, it says, "For on this night, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of the joy, you were eating the Passover in Egypt, when all the powers of Mastema had been let loose to slay all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive maidservant in the mill and to the cattle." Continue on down, and Jubilees 49, 10-12, it says, "Let the children of Israel come and observe the Passover on the day of its fixed time, on the 14th day of the first month, between the evenings, from the third part of the day to the third part of the night." Now, a lot of you guys are going, wait a minute, what do you mean the third part of the day and the third part of the night? That's How does that work? So remember, they had all night to eat this, or they were encouraged to eat the Passover lamb. Once it was dark, they started eating the Passover lamb. But that was the beginning of the festival. That was the beginning of the 15th day, because the 14th day at evening had ended, and that transitionary moment of evening started the 15th day. And then they could eat the Passover lamb, and then they were supposed to eat it until the third part of the evening. Um, the third part of the night. And we're going to go over the different parts of the day and the night as explained to us in a minute.
Says in Jubilees 49:10, let the children of Israel come and observe the Passover on the day of its fixed time, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings, from the third part of the day to the third part of the night. For 2 portions of the day are given to the light, and a third part to the evening. Okay, so let's see this. You can see that the third part of the day belongs to the night, and that the third part of the night belongs to the morning, belongs to the day, Yom, right? So you can see here that I've put the divider line right there between 2 and 3, the second and third part, right? And you're going to see how this all fits together. Because I haven't been able to disprove this with any passage. Once I found this, you start comparing passages to this, and every single passage fits with this formula. Let's just, I haven't been able to disprove it. If you can disprove it, please show me. I'd be very interested because I can't disprove it.
It says, for 2 portions of the day are given to the light, and a third part to the evening. This is that which the Lord commanded you, that you should observe it between the evenings. And it is not permissible to slay it during any period of the light, but during the period bordering on the evening. And let them eat it at the time of the evening, until the third part of the night. Whatever is left over of all its flesh from the third part of the night and onwards, let them burn with fire. All right, guys. So if you don't already catch what it's saying, we're going to try to break it down and explain it with some visuals here in a minute. But let's before we do that, now that we have an introductory idea to, we've got multiple past Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers telling you to 14th, and then the 15th is when you eat it. That's actually when you slay it, right? And evening time is this transitionary moment. That's why Jubilees helps you understand that there's a transitionary moment between the 14th and the 15th, helps you understand all the verbiage from Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. And it's also telling you that there are these 3 different parts to both the day and the night. And they were to kill at the evening time to kill the Passover, eat it when it got dark, which is the beginning of the 15th. And then they had all night basically to eat it to the third part of the night before the sun comes up. And that was, that's what we see. In my opinion, that's what we actually see. Different reasonings happening through the Gospels with Yeshua's conviction and being brought into the before the Sanhedrin and things like that.
So if we put the titles, the names of these time periods, and I'll touch on that when I'll come back to it. We put them on the screen. We have what you see. Okay, so I'll come back to this passage and I'll explain it using this graphic here. So let's examine Exodus 12 and Jubilees 49 side by side. Okay, so Jubilees 49, verse 12, it says, it is not permissible to slay the Passover during any period of light, but during the period bordering on the evening, and let them eat it at the time of the evening until the third part of the night. So there's a start and an end there. The start is the bordering on the evening. That is Erev in the Hebrew. That is, if you go back to the graphic, Erev, the third part of the evening, right after sunset. Okay, and it says eat it from then until the third part of the night. So you start at third part of the evening. Next comes the first part of the night, then the second part of the night. You eat it starting the third part of the evening, continue through the first, continue to the second, and then right there at the third part, when the third part begins, that's the point at which it's no longer okay to eat the Passover lamb because Passover has ended and the next day has begun, the next day in this case being the first day of unleavened bread. See, the 15th day begins it begins at the end of the second part and at the beginning of the third part of the morning, of the night. It's of the night. It's called morning. It's called boker. It belongs to the morning. It belongs to the day, like the angel said. Let's go back to the passage. He said, 2 portions are given to the day, they're given to the light, and the third part is given to the evening, right? The third part up there, the third part, evening, erev, of the third part of the day, it belongs to the night. And so the third part of the morning, boker, belongs to the morning. Because we have to have the reasoning, I can say that it's a logical proof, okay? You have to have the 18 hours. You have to have the 40 minutes in a day. And so if you say first, second, third part of a day, and you also say first, second, third part of a night, the day and the night has to equal 18. That's how I can find the inverse and solve this.
But let's look at the Sabbaths real quick, because this also it helps us calculate these ideas together when we look at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Leviticus 23, 1 through 2, it says, the Lord spoke again to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, the Lord's appointed times, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations, my appointed times are these. Now, I want you to take a mental note, if you can, look at this term, appointed times and holy convocations. These are important terms to understand, not just in understanding Torah as a whole, but also in trying to calculate this idea, because it's going to help us when we look at other verses later. And that's Leviticus 23, 1 through 2. So opening up the chapter of Leviticus, he is talking about his holy convocations, what he calls his appointed times. And now he's about to go down the list of what those appointed times are through the whole chapter. Verse 3, he explains the weekly Sabbath. It's the 7th day, and he explains that that's the first one he mentions. The first holy convocation and appointed time is the 7th day weekly Sabbath. Verses 4 through 14, then he starts to explain the Feast of Passover and Unleavened Bread. Now, here's where it can, guys, I just want to try to give you a shortcut or a hint, if you will. If you're reading the Gospels and sometimes you get confused because it'll say the Feast of Passover or it'll say the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it uses it interchangeably. That's because culturally they did use it interchangeably, because Passover was intimately connected to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You can't have one without the other. So therefore, sometimes they would just call it the Feast of Passover, and they were speaking about the whole time period of the 14th all the way through the 21st. And other times they would speak about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it assumed Passover in that as well, because they all knew they were both intimately tied together, and you can't do one without the other. It was a part of the observance. So here in Leviticus 23, verse 4 through 14, he goes into explaining the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which includes Passover, as we were just explaining from other verses. Verses 15 through 21 in Leviticus 23, it talks about the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits. Guys, if you haven't already seen our Torah portions that we've done on this with explaining Jubilees 6 and Leviticus 23 and Numbers 28 and all these other passages explaining that Feast of Weeks and First Fruits is a one festival. It's a double-fold nature, as we're told, and it happens on one day, and it's one festival. So it's this is what it's explained to us in Scripture. And also, again, Jubilees fleshes it out with like, there's no mincing of words, there's no way to confuse it. It just straight up tells you it's a double-fold festival that happens both on the same day, and it's been kept in heaven by the Father and the angels since creation began. So it's a pretty unique concept. Verses 23 through 25, the Feast of Trumpets. This is a one-day festival as well. And verse 26 through 32 is the Day of Atonement. Obviously, that's a one-day festival as well, or it's a one-day Sabbath, I should say. It's not quite a festival in the same sense of the other festivals, but it is considered a Sabbath. And then verse 33 through 36, we have the Feast of Tabernacles, with the 8th day being the Feast of Ingathering as well. Again, that's something you only get explained to you from the book of Jubilees. You do not get it fleshed out to you in Exodus 23 or in Leviticus 23 or even in Numbers 29. So you only get the explanation of when you're celebrating Feast of Ingathering and why it was even brought about and why it's at the end of Tabernacles in the book of Jubilees. So we did I can't remember which episode we did on Torah portions on that, our Kina portions, but we covered that really thoroughly. So the beautiful part about this, guys, is that we have all these Sabbaths, the weekly and all these feast day Sabbaths being explained to us. But let's look at Leviticus 23:32, when it talks about the Day of Atonement. And it says, it is a Sabbath to be of complete rest to you. You shall humble your souls on the 9th of the month at evening. From the evening until evening, you shall keep your Sabbath. Now, what did we just see explained to us about what the evening time was? It was that transitionary time between one calendar day to another calendar day. Now, what I think is interesting, I put, as you can see on the screen, the passage below it. It's the same exact verse. It's just the Masoretic, and it actually tells you that it uses the plural here, which would make perfect sense with the entirety of the chapter, which is because all it's doing is talking about all the different Sabbaths, which is a plural number of Sabbaths. But it's saying it's a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls from the ninth day of the month. From evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbaths. So for a lot of people, this is the clincher. Your weekly Sabbaths and your feast day Sabbaths, from evening to evening, you keep your Sabbath. That, unfortunately there are folks that want to make an argument that they say, well, this Day of Atonement from the ninth, from the evening to evening, it's just that one day out of the year that you observe your daytime, your calendar day from evening to evening in observance of this particular Day of Atonement instruction. And guys, that's where we're going to run into a huge counting issue with the actual calendar itself. So you would have a 12-hour discrepancy just right there, and I'll explain where you'd have another 12-hour problem discrepancy with Feast of Unleavened Bread here in just a minute, if you kept your days from the moment the sun came up. If that's when you started counting as a new calendar day, was when the sun actually crested and popped up, then you're going to be completely off with trying to keep the instructions of the feast days, both Feast of Unleavened Bread and also the Day of Atonement. So this is why the Septuagint is wonderful for a variety of reasons, just for comparing and contrasting. And in this particular verse, it actually says plural Sabbaths. It's very interesting to consider.
All right, I wanted to address this point real quick. I don't believe the Leviticus 23:32 is a proof that all Sabbaths must be done, evening to evening. Um, if you look in the Septuagint, it actually says Sabbath of Sabbaths is the term that is given to the Feast of Atonement. And it says from evening to evening you shall celebrate your Sabbath of Sabbaths. Um, so I am in the group of the people who say, yes, this is a particular specific event that you would do evening to evening. I'll adjust the next point there.
Here's a quick breakdown, guys. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. So what did I talk about earlier, right? We read the verses in the scriptures where it says from the 14th to the 21st, but it calls it a 7-day feast. But that's 8 days when you actually count them. So wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, that's why we had it explained to us in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Jubilees, that the 14th day is when now you've held that lamb since the 10th. Now it's the 14th, and at evening time you slay it. And when it's actually dark, you begin to eat it, because that is the start of the 15th day, which is the beginning of the 7-day festival. And as you can see on the graphic on the screen, day 2 of these 8 total days from the 14th to the 21st, day 2 is the first day of the 7-day feast. And as you can see, that's when you would eat the lamb at the start of the day during the nighttime, when there's no more light out, just like Jubilees 49, 10 through 12 told us. It's also considered a Sabbath day, right? Then you got the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. Those are not Sabbaths. You just enjoy the festival. You'll do, you go back to work if you need to. But then the 21st day is another Sabbath, and that is the last day of the 7-day feast. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread is over at that point, because it's the end of the 21st, just as we had read from the evening time.
So I disagree with the point about the counting issue. Um, if you start Passover on the third part of the day in the evening, Erev, and you slay the Passover lamb there, and then you prepare it and eat it from that point uh, through the first part of the night, then through the second part of the night, then at the point which I showed earlier, that would be the point where it's not okay to eat the Passover. Um, and the reasoning is because this is the 15th, and the 15th is uh, is the next day, right? It's the first day of unleavened bread. Um, so I disagree with the counting issue, because it's still 7 days. It's still 7 days. That's why it says that you begin Passover on the 14th. It doesn't say Passover is on the 15th. Unleavened bread begins at the third part of the night. It's called morning. and that'd be the 15th day. So, and starting from there, you have 7 days.
So Exodus 12, 18 through 19, it says, and in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat the unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. Why would it say that? Until the 21st day of the month? Why would you be commanded at the evening time of the 14th? And this is where people get tripped up, because they say, well, wait a minute, like it's the 14th to the 21st. And they're like, well, see, it must be the day must start at the beginning of the sunrise. And you're like, well, we just reviewed, hopefully you have, consider what we reviewed already as far as the breakdown of the evening time transitioning to the next day. So that's why they would use this verbiage to intimately tie Passover and unleavened bread together. Like I said, they do all the time anyway in the Gospels, because that was the actual food that you were going to be eating at the start of the 15th, at the end of the evening time, which is the start of the 15th, was the Passover itself, which is something that you deal with at the end of the day on the 14th, right before it transitions to the 15th, during this period called the evening time. So this is why it can tell us in Exodus 12, 18 through 19, that in the evening of the 14th, you shall start to eat the unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month of the evening. That's why it's still 7 days, because if you know what the evening time means. So much of this deduction and much of this inspection into these words and how to count the days and determining what the calendar day itself has to do with understanding the word evening itself. And that is the transitionary period between 2 calendar days that happens at the evening time when the sun crests and goes down, as it transitions into the nighttime and there's total darkness. And that's the beginning of the new calendar day. And this is where you would have 7 days they would still be eating, and they would stop eating at the evening time of the 21st. Why? Because it's almost the 22nd. And you don't want to eat it for 8 days. You're only eating it 7 days as instructed for the festival. So that's, I'm hoping that this is starting to make a little bit of sense, guys. But many times it's, graphics are helpful as well, right? So if we look at the 12 hours of night and the 12 hours of day, this is the breakdown that Jubilees 49, 10 through 12 tried to tell us a few minutes ago. And this is why I put the little thing here to the left, that evening is a transitionary time between 2 calendar days, and that would start approximately at 6 o'clock at night and go till 10 o'clock at night. Now, you also have to keep in mind the geography of where this is taking place. It's in Israel, so they're kind of, this would have been, and also the time period of the year, the season of the year. So this is why it's in the springtime, the sun's staying out a little bit longer, even in the Israel's geography. So you'd have from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, that transitionary time. It's plenty of time for them to actually slay the lamb, prepare it, cook it, and then eat it once they know it's completely dark, nearing towards 9 or 10 o'clock. And that's the first part of 3 parts of a 12-hour night, right? Because 12 divided by 3 is 4 hours each. So 6 to 10, that's part 1. 10 to 2 a.m. is part 2. 2 to 6 a.m. in the morning is part 3. And oh, lo and behold, here comes the day, the 12 hours of the day, just like Jesus said, right? That there are 12 hours in a day. You guys know, tell me in the chat, do you guys remember what verse that is where Jesus says there's 12 hours in a day? So then naturally you have the same process. It's the breakdown of 12 hours, right? 6 to 10 a.m. is part 1, 10 to 2 p.m. is part 2, 2 to 6 p.m. is part 3. So that's, to me, that's, let me see, hang on a second. I think I might be getting a message from my wife. No. So when can you guys remember, let's look at Matthew 27 real quick. I want to actually look at, in accordance with what you see on the screen here, this is going to help us out a little bit. Let me stop screen sharing. And actually I can screen share over here. And let's look at Matthew 27. So when they actually crucified him, and all right, guys, can everyone see this? Carla Marburg, I think you're saying John 11:19. I think that's where it says, Jesus said there's 12 hours in a day. But if we go to, let me see here, yeah. verse 45. This is where you have, now from the 6th hour darkness fell upon the land, because I think he was actually put on the cross earlier than that, right? He was on the cross for 6 hours. Is that what it was? Where did he get put on? When did he get put on the cross? Right here. Crucifixion. You guys know? I'm going to look to the chat in the comments here. Do you guys know how many hours he was on the cross? I thought it was 6. Okay, so we got some people that are pretty upset in the chat. So what we're going to do after we go over some of these slides, guys, before you get extremely triggered and leave, is I want to open up, questions and answers, so you guys can throw some scriptures at me that you think negates what I'm trying to show you here, that you think the day may start at a different time. And we're talking about the calendar day, not the terminology of daytime when the sun is out, but the calendar day. And then we'll be looking up those up on your request here in a few minutes. Okay, guys? So it says, from the 6th hour, darkness fell upon the land until the 9th hour. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice. And that's when he gave up his spirit. I just can't remember the exact verse where it says how long he was on the cross. I thought it was 6 hours, but guys, if I'm off, if I'm not remembering that correctly, please let me know in the chat if you do know. But basically, that's what we're looking at here. Is we have, let me go back to this other screen. We have the 9th hour. That would be, according to this breakdown that Jubilees gives us, and what I put on screen here, that would be 3 in the afternoon. So that would be in the second and third part of the day, right? From noon to 3 in the afternoon, that would be the 9th hour. So that perfectly lines up with what you're seeing on the screen here. Because why? Because 6 p.m. would be the 12th hour, the last part of the day, or the end of the day, if you will. From 5 to 6, basically. So it lines up perfectly with what Jubilees is broken down as 3 parts of the day and 3 parts of the night, and how it explains that the transitionary time between what is called evening, the definition of the word evening, is the transitionary time when the sun goes down and it becomes fully dark. You've went from one calendar day to another calendar day. So that's hopefully that is some things I wanted to try to mention right off the bat, just to open up discourse. And then if you guys, I know there's a lot of people, that disagree with the day beginning when the night dawns. Don't you like that play on words? But let's look at Genesis 1. Now, everything I just explained to you, a lot of people would say, okay, whether you disagree or not, hopefully it at least makes more sense why in Genesis 1 we start to get this terminology, and there was evening and there was morning one day. Same thing for days 2 through 7. 2 through 6. There was evening and there was morning a second day, or day 2. Because the starting period of day 2 is in the evening time, and then it goes through the daytime. All right, the evening time, which begins the night, the 12 hours of night, leads into the 12 hours of day, and then you run up into the evening time again, which would transition into day 3, day 4, day 5. So this is why Genesis would even speak like that. To me, it goes back to kind of that conversation that we've been having in the past, where the rabbis of ancient times would call Jubilees, they would call it a lesser Genesis. And I think that's a horrible terminology, or just a way to explain Jubilees, because it gives us a ton of detailed information for observing feast days, for actually helping to understand when the feast days are observed and why they were even implemented. And it expounds upon the law of God in a wonderful way. But it also rubs against things that Judaism teaches. The rabbis of Judaism actually teach certain things from certain prejudices about the way they view Jews and the Goyim, the nations, and how, like, certain dispensation teachings they hold within Judaism about the law of Moses, that Jubilees completely rubs against all those teachings. So I can understand why they would not want to put it in their canon, because it just refutes a lot of what they taught. So, but the blessing of it is that it actually helps us with detailed time periods and statements understand how to actually keep the instructions in the law to a T. So I think it's wonderful. Um, all right, and this is why, as we're looking in the chat, it's like WWE in the chat, guys. I just want to ask everyone to walk in love. Um, if this is a topic that a lot of people really get passionate about, and I think it's sad. Okay, so does anyone have any questions as far as, since we're doing a live stream? Does anyone have any questions of scripture that you would like me to address? Oh, looks like someone is encouraging. Okay, looks like Defender of Truth. You said you can't use Leviticus 23 to define a day's start. The Moedim are distinctly separate special times. Go back to Genesis. I did go back to Genesis. That's actually why I pulled up Genesis, because Genesis explains there was evening, there was morning, and it counts off the days. And what does it tell us about from verses 14 through 18 and 19? That it was for what? The sun, moon, and stars are for what? To be for signs, for seasons, right? For days and years. But if you actually look in the Hebrew of this word, this is the Moedims right here. So everything that I've been saying tonight, 100% matches to the Moedims as would be introduced in Genesis 1. This is also reaffirmed in Jubilees chapter 2 about the Moedims and that they're for signs and seasons. But it has a lot more wording into it, so I won't go into it too much. So if you guys, this is what I was trying to show you with the slides and the breakdown. If you're going to say that Leviticus 23 is a special occasion, like the Moedims are on their own calendar, their own counting of hours and daytime, what do you do with the extra time that you miss? You guys I've never seen anyone even try to address it. What do you do with the extra time that you have to skip in order to ignore? Like suddenly you're not counting your daytime anymore, and your feast days, you're counting them differently by the evening times, whereas people are suggesting the rest of the year we're counting our calendar days by the rising of the sun. So then what do you do with that 12-hour discrepancy? Where does that go? Where does that get made up for in the scriptures? It's never explained, it's never mentioned, because that's not what it explains to us as far as the day.
Okay, I wanted to address Genesis here real quick. Um, so it says he called the darkness night, and then Erev came, V'yahi Erev, V'yahi Boker, right? The first, then evening came, then morning came. Yom the first, right? So the first day. Um, I I would refer back to my here. Let me get the other screen on here. Not that one. This one here. Um, we go back over to here. There we go. Uh, Yahuah would be creating the beginning of the day would be the technically it would be here. Um, so he creates Yom. He creates the light first, right? In the beginning, darkness was on the earth, right? Okay, third part of the night. This is morning, Boker. But then at the time when light should be, he says, let there be light. On the first day, first thing, there was light. In the first part of the day, he starts working and creating light. He does his work in the Yom portion that lasts for the duration of the first and the second part. Then become it becomes evening. It says, then there was evening, and then there was morning, right? So it says Erev came next, and Lila goes to the first part, to the second part of the night, and then there was Boker, morning. The first day ends here, and then after Boker is finished, and the Lila has come to an end, because this belongs to the day, but it is part of the night. So once this is finished, he starts creating again in the Yom, on the second Yom, the first part here. So, and then he creates the second day, and then evening, and then we go through the Lila, then Boker, morning comes, and after Boker passes right? It says Boker, which is the signifying part saying that the first day has ended, right? The previous day has ended at Boker. So comes Boker, then Yom, right? And the creation happens during the Yom, and then he's finished by evening, okay? Uh, so that's the explanation I'm trying to say. If you just say that there's evening and there's morning, the first day, evening and morning together don't equal the 24-hour day. Uh, you need the Yom part, which is a 12-hour from sun up to sunset, and then at the evening after sunset, then we have the two parts of night. This is Lila, and then we have Boker, the early morning when the dew is out, right? And then the sun comes back up for the second day, beginning the Yom portion of the day. Okay. So okay, so I had to go back just a little bit there. There was another point I wanted to address. Sean said he had never heard anyone address this. Um, it's what do you do with the extra hours you'd have in a day? Well, the point that I'm wanting to present is that the book of Leviticus is not uh, specifying when days start. Um, the books that would specify when a day starts would be Jubilees and Enoch. They specifically deal with the sun and the calendars and Jubilee counting and all that. Um, and they are the ones that I would look to for when a day starts. And then Leviticus is Sabbath holiday celebrations is what it's describing. Um, and you may want to say that those are the same thing, and um, maybe you could prove that out, but I am pretty sure that the Sabbaths are separate. They are special occasions. They're celebration, uh, events that happen. Some of them happen at the beginning of the day. Some of them start in Erev, the night part. That it was given over to the night. Um, so, you know, Enoch and Jubilees are the ones that set the precedence of when a day begins. Jubilees chapter 2 says that the sun. Well, here, let's just get out Jubilees chapter 2 here real quick. 1 second. Okay, so Jubilees chapter 2, let's do verse 8. On the fourth day, he created the sun and the moon and the stars, and he set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Yahuah appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for Sabbaths of years and for jubilees and for all seasons of the years. And it divides the light from the darkness for prosperity in all things which prosper, which are basically plants. Uh, uh, these three kinds he made on the fourth day. So in Enoch chapter 71, it also says that um, that the sun is well, he's given the laws of the luminaries, and the first law of the luminaries is the law of the sun. Uh, so the precedence that is set is in Jubilees and Enoch, and it says that the sun uh, begins the day. It's the dawn when the sun comes. It's the dawn. That's what the beginning of the day is. And over on uh, my little graphic here, not that, not this page, but this one. Um, so the Yom day part up here would begin. That'd be the start of the day when the sun came, right? So um, with that precedent, um, you would read Leviticus 23, um, assuming that the day began at sunrise, and then you would celebrate your celebrations, the Sabbaths, when it was when it was dictated that you should celebrate them. So the seventh day Sabbath is always, that's the easy one, right? That's the one introduced first. Um, and it's the seventh day. It says 6 days you do your work, but the seventh Yom, right? The day, the working hours in the field would be during daylight. So during that Yom, and it's a 24-hour period, right? It ends at the boker of the next day, right? So on that Yom, the seventh one, you don't do any work, right? So that one begins at dawn, uh, and every Sabbath would, unless it specifically says that this particular Sabbath is for an occasion that was an event that happened or will happen in the night. So, for example, Passover, right? It begins at Erev because the prophetic event that happened there is the powers of Mastema, the Satan, were let loose to kill the firstborn of Egypt. Right, that happened in the evening. They had the blood on the doorposts, and Satan had to walk right past them, couldn't touch them. And all this happened during the night. So for this Sabbath, we start this one. We do this one between the evenings. And in my other video, I showed how the angel defined the term between the evenings. Um, and then there's the other example of the atonement, Judgment Day. Um, that is a 24-hour Sabbath as well, and it begins from the evening of the ninth. So it even says it's the ninth day, right? If the days began at dusk, wouldn't it just say the 10th day? Because the day would begin at dusk, at sunset, and then you'd start at Erev, right there, where it says, and do uh, your Sabbath for atonement. All right, so I thought I'd make an outro here. Um, I think this video has been pretty thorough in going through the verses that Sean has provided. Um, the purpose of this video was to open a discussion about this subject because truthfully, I don't think that it is a settled issue. Um, I have not seen anyone bring up the division of the days and the nights according to Jubilees the way that I have, and I've waited until now to do so, just because, I feel like I've passed that threshold at this point, 30th birthday and all, that, perhaps I could share something that I have found. So I want to reiterate that the purpose of this video is not to attack Sean or you know, it's not a slight against him. It's not meant to demonize him or to say that he's wrong in things. Um, you know, I respect Sean. He's a leader of a Torah community. Um, I look up to him. I hope that someday, maybe I could have, a Torah community of my own that I was, showing, showing people the truth. So the purpose of this video is not, as it's not meant to be an attack. It's meant, I'm trying to just present, you know, the stuff that I found, and I just want it to be, understood thoroughly and considered. So I hope that this video does that, and I hope that you will address this subject. So thank you for watching.